The alien abduction of Tracey Jones. Hello, I'm your host Luke, and today we're going over the bizarre encounters of Tracey Jones. The bizarre happenings and experienced by Tracey Jones had reached such an intensity by the summer of 1997 that she had contacted a person named Dodd. After years of chilling incidents, also experienced by her husband Darren and their 4 children, they were reaching the breaking point. Most likely, as we see in other cases, that this had been happening for decades since Tracey Jones was a child. What intrigued Dodd even more about her was that she was physically, psychically gifted. Whether this was a result of her experiences or not is unknown. Upon first speaking to Dodd, however, she would describe the layout of his office and home, and she also had a sense of certain people or situations that she would state, however, that this power is not something that she can control. Perhaps part of the reason that Tracey assumed a supernatural explanation for her baffling experiences was the location of some of the initial incidents. In early 1993, Tracey and Darren and their first child were living in a 300-year-old cottage, which they rented from her parents. On one particular evening, at shortly after 9 p.m., each could hear a strange and urgent humming sound coming from outside. They peered out of the window, but they could see nothing unusual. That was until an intensely bright light hit the cottage, and it was so bright that they could see nothing at all of their surroundings. The incident appeared to last only for seconds, but by the time the lights had vanished and the humming ceased, 15 minutes had gone by. The couple remained inside their property until the following morning, when Darren would go out to investigate. Under the safety of daylight, Darren would venture outside, and a solid wrought iron fence around the garden of the property had been twisted and wrenched apart. He also discovered 3 large doors to outbuildings that had their heavy-duty padlocks ripped off, and the doors swung open. They would find the doors open repeatedly during the course of the time that they called the cottage home. Perhaps one of the more mystifying incidents would be when Tracey, after having been in and out of the hospital due to a chest infection, would make a startling discovery. She was receiving daily visits due to an infected wound following her treatment, and this went on for almost a month, and such was the severity of this wound that it was bandaged each day and secured in place by thick medical tape. One morning she awoke pain-free, and when she reached to her chest, the bandage was no longer there, nor was the wound infected. It appeared as though it had simply vanished or healed overnight, and incidentally, the bandage was nowhere to be found. So she was taken. Similar instances occurred with her undergarments, where the following morning she was wearing her pajamas, but the undergarments were gone. Darren had his own bone-chilling encounters around the same time as Tracey, when she had her chest infection. In the early hours of one morning, he was still half asleep. He could see a figure by the window looking into their first aid box. He believed it to be Tracey, who must have gotten out of bed for more painkillers, and only when he lay back down and felt his wife beside him did he realize it wasn't her. Sitting bolt upright and looking in the direction of the first aid box, the figure was now gone. The strange events would follow Tracey and Darren to their next home and would steadily appear to increase in intensity. Their doors would open and shut with a bang. Electrical devices and appliances would suddenly break for no reason. The toilet would even flush, and their water taps would turn on under their own power. Tracey on several occasions would even hear footsteps approaching, and even of someone walking upright past her. One particular room in their house had a constant aroma of lavender, and the room would also remain permanently cold, even with the heating turned up to full. A television in the room would also turn itself on regularly. That's when I would board up that room. When the family moved again to a house near the Yorkshire moors, the activity came with them again. Both Tracey and Darren would regularly see strange lights over the moors, and they would swoop down and back up and out of sight in an instant. One morning after Darren went to take a shower, Tracey went into the bathroom only seconds later for water, and her husband was not there. She then called his name and searched frantically around their house, but to no avail. When she raced back upstairs, he was, quote, back, walking out of the bathroom, and coincidentally or not, Darren would begin to experience increasing instances of missing time. The couple's 2-year-old son was also experiencing night terrors, and on one occasion, a strange four-fingered handprint was clearly visible on his torso. So those might not be grays, because an abductee, I know that's an artist. So they then moved to Dubai. In July of 1997, they moved out there with their whole family, and there had been a several weeks delay before Tracey and their children joined him. And interestingly, during this time, Darren experienced nothing out of the ordinary. However, upon his family's arrival, the bizarre experiences began almost instantly. Their son would begin telling his parents that, quote, a man lives in the light in his room. Furthermore, he would go into the light with his sister to talk and play. He also seemed to have knowledge of the roof of the house that they were renting, and he claimed that the man told him that a water tank was on the roof, and this not only worried Tracey and Darren, but there was no way that he could have known this. Marcus's sister also began to experience strange visitors. She told Tracey of a bright light in her room, from which a, quote, strange man came out of, and she would draw a picture of the man for Tracey, who would add several of her own to the collection. When she showed the pictures to her son, he immediately singled out the one his sister had drawn and said that this was the man in the light. As well as the increase in activity around the couple's children, the malfunctioning of electrical equipment also began again. Crockery would move across the kitchen table and even smash on the floor, and Tracey and Georgina were sitting at the kitchen table one morning when Tracey suddenly realized that she couldn't account for the previous. So with all this going on, they underwent hypnotic regression. So Tracey herself would undergo hypnotic regression. She would go back to the night that her chest wound had vanished. She would tell of waking up in her bed in the middle of the night, and at the foot of her bed were two dark figures. Each wore a long hooded robe, which, interestingly or not, is a detail that often surfaces in such reports. She would also state that each of the figures had a piercing bright blue eyes and white beards, so they were Nordics. Suddenly she found herself on a table. She couldn't move, but there was nothing visibly holding her down. She noticed a large needle descending towards her exposed chest, with red lights appearing to be coming from the needle. As the open wound on her chest and the needle connected, there was an intense burning sensation that began. She could see the strange hooded figures in the room, but her head was locked in an upwards position. It was at this point that Tracey was brought out of the session, and the incidents still continue to this day. However, they are far from the only ones that have such supernatural elements entwined in them. Thanks for watching. This has been your host, Luke. Like this video if you liked it. Subscribe for more. I hope you have a great day.